Hey guys, welcome back to the My Body, My Jokes podcast. It's me, it's Morgan. And you may have noticed if you're watching on video that I am recording my first Zoom/Riverside internet connection interview. I haven't done this before. I've been such a spoiled studio brat, so I finally am connecting with some people outside of Denver, which is very exciting. As I'm sure you can imagine, Denver is not the most diverse place. But thank you for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate everyone that's been commenting and engaging and asking questions. I know it's sometimes a tough subject, and I know that sometimes these conversations are weird to have, especially with a stranger. So thank you for being here. But today I have a very special guest, someone that I have connected with online many times, and someone who represents a part of the population that doesn't get to be in a lot of these conversations. A man. Oh my God. So today I have certified nutrition. I have to look at my notes so I can remember everything. Certified nutritionist, certified master health coach, male body image, and aligned eating expert, Jonny Landels. Hello.
Hello. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for reading out the 5-page intro.
Absolutely. Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. You know what I mean?
I think I just keep adding certifications to kind of keep myself interested. Do you know what I mean? And then I just have to make sure that people are aware I do it.
Well, also you're a man, so you have to tell everyone all of your business because that's just part of being a man, right? That's what we love.
Should have prepared for that that hit. Thanks.
No, I'm very excited to have you on because honestly, I have not had too many men on the podcast, and a lot of the time it's because sometimes I've invited some guys to be on the podcast, and I think interestingly enough, it's almost more difficult for them to have conversations like these that tend to happen on the podcast, whether it's about weight stigma, fat phobia, their own journey. I think because unfortunately, and tell me if I'm wrong, men aren't really given the space to do that in general. Like they're not really given permission to talk about these things in life.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good point, and I think if they do, it's difficult for them to find a safe space, or like where somebody's not just gonna completely take the piss out of them the entire time, right? Like a part of my kind of background is a lot of like lad jokes and kind of banter and things were all about my weight, and that was what led me to be overly focused on my weight. And so if you talk about these things, a lot of guys just don't hold space for it, and that fat phobia and personal responsibility bias is so big within the male communities. Like I've chatted to people who are like, well, why don't you just eat a salad and go for a run? Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, it's a bit kind of, there's such a thing called genetics, and
they're like, rub some dirt in it, you're fine.
Yeah, like just fucking get up earlier, fat ass. And it's just like, well, it's a bit more complex than that, and you try to talk about the kind of psychology behind it, and a lot of men just don't get it. And I think that's also through lack of emotional intelligence and emotional tools, because they've just never been taught them.
Yeah, it's such a bummer because it's such a double-edged sword, because on one hand it's like, being a man, you kind of get afforded more privileges than most, but at the same time you still live under the patriarchy, which is a system that kind of oppresses everyone in a way. Like whether you're a man, a woman, like you're still dealing with societal pressures that are kind of bullshit. So I'm really excited to chat with you today because I have gotten to know you, or have become aware of you, because of your online presence, mostly through Instagram, because you're really good at posting about your own journey through your weight and how it's affected you, and being a coach and like helping other men and their body image, as well as like nutrition and, as you call it, aligned eating, which I like that phrase because I haven't heard that before. Usually I hear like intuitive eating or food freedom, but it's all kind of like within the same category. So tell me just like a brief kind of intro of like, how did you get to be where you are now? How did you get to be this guy on social media where you're like sharing shirtless photos and you're like commenting back at weird men saying weird shit about you and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'll give you a very quick summary. I was actually doing a post about this because we were coming on the pod, right? So I was like reviewing everything, and then I was like, this will actually make a great post to like talk about.
Yeah.
I've not talked about it for a long time. So I grew up bigger than my friends, and therefore got called fat a lot in a negative manner, taking the piss out of. Therefore, when I was in my teenage years, I kind of became obsessed with my weight. My dad passed away from a heart attack, unfortunately, when I was 16, and a lot of that was kind of tied into his weight, right? So then there was a big thing of like, man, I need to do this for my health as well. And where do you go when you're 16 in 2006? Like, the internet's only been around for a while. For me, it was men's health magazines, and men's health magazines are just cover model shredded men.
Yeah.
And then through uni, I kind of became obsessed with like dieting and going to the gym, but then I was also playing rugby and at university, so I drank a lot of beer, so it was like very up and down through uni. After uni, I started CrossFit, and my mates and I were kind of joking about my weight, and I was like, this, I'm going to get on it now, like I'll make a difference. And so I started this kind of bodybuilder meal plan that got me lean for like the first time ever, but I was eating chicken and rice 6 times a day and hating myself. So I then saw an old rugby friend of mine was a nutrition coach promoting flexible dieting, which is effectively counting calories. Back then it was called If It Fits Your Macros. It was like a big movement of how you can get lean through eating, ice cream and sweets. And because I'd not been allowing myself all of those foods for so long, I was like, hell yeah, this sounds like my kind of diet.
Yeah.
So I signed up with him, and my life became my fitness pal. And through that was when I started to coach CrossFit. So I became a full-time CrossFit coach, and then I decided to get my first nutrition certification, because as I was losing weight, people were asking me how I was doing it. So I was like, let's go get a nutrition course so that I can help other people.
Of course.
That was back in 2014, 2015. So that all happened, and then for the next few years, my weight kind of yo-yoed up and down, right? I'd get like really lean if I was really focused on tracking calories, but then I'd go through periods where I couldn't be bothered to track calories, and I'd try kind of go it on my own, and I would start to gain a little bit of weight. Nothing ever like dramatic, but because I was so obsessed with the scale, that would always send me into a bit of a panic. So I'd be like, I need to get back on it. I need to get back to tracking calories, or I need to try and do this hand portion measuring thing, or I need to try fasting or whatever. And as I was going through this, I was still coaching people on weight loss, and I was getting more and more certifications, and was kind of then like trying out new strategies on myself. And it wasn't until 2019, 2020, and then COVID hit that I was like, man, I'm training twice a day for CrossFit because I'm obsessed with kind of trying to become a CrossFit athlete. I'm either tracking my calories or I'm fasting all of the time, and my weight's still kind of going up and down. And then I watched a documentary on the BBC, which was with a famous English cricket athlete, and it was talking about how through his body weight struggles he'd been diagnosed with bulimia, and his bulimic diagnosis was more of the over-exercising kind. Like, that was the way that he purged. So he'd train like 2 to 3 times a day, and was like obsessed with his weight and obsessed with food, and it was kind of his story of his eating disorder. And I watched that, and I was going through my master health coaching certification at the time, and I was just like, fucking hell, that story is so close to mine. And I was watching it, was just like, this is exactly my story. Like, I'm obsessed with food, I'm terrified of gaining weight, my weight's going up and down. Every time I kind of stopped doing something restrictive, I'd gain weight. I was obsessed with my step count, I was obsessed with over-exercising, and I wasn't competing in CrossFit anymore by this point. I was just wanting to exercise normally. And then through my coaching certification, I came across the term disordered eating. And I was like, okay, this is making so much sense. Like, disordered eating is like the gateway drug to eating disorder, or it's the, it's the set of behaviours. It's like saying that there are loads of different types of people on the spectrum, right? And some of them fall into classic diagnoses, but some of them don't. And disordered eating is the same thing. It's like you've got disordered eating, which are all these sets of behaviors and mindsets, and then you've got specific eating disorders where people have to meet specific criteria. But a lot of people will struggle very intensely with disordered eating without ever getting a formal eating disorder diagnosis or thinking that they need one.
Absolutely.
And particularly, I think with men, there's that, as you said, because there's that lack of a safe space to talk about it. I think there's a inherent, well, I don't have disordered eating. I'm just disciplined. I just have willpower.
Yes.
I just want it. I just work harder. And actually, you've kind of got to go a bit deeper to think, no, actually, I've got a serious problem here. So that was back in 2020, 2021. And that's when I started reading into intuitive eating, health at every size, fat phobia. And I basically did a huge U-turn of like anything I'd ever been taught. Because all of the formal nutrition education is weight is bad. Don't be fat, and track your macros.
It's very
Whereas it was like I needed to look a lot deeper into that, particularly around like psychology of eating, the whole history of fat phobia and weight stigma, genetic diversity amongst human beings, why there was always so much discrepancy in scientific studies around weight and eating, and how little we do actually know about all of that. So it was just the last 4 years have just been a huge kind of learning curve of going kind of the other way. And in that, I've gained a lot of weight myself. And so a lot of my work I've been doing on myself, because then I've needed to be like, what's my relationship with food like? What's my relationship with exercise like? What's my relationship with myself like? How much of my identity was tied into my weight? And as I've gained weight, as you've seen on my page, like people aren't friendly, and
no.
But also, I kind of have to sometimes communicate that with people close to me or former clients or people like that about, this is just the way that my body's reacted to like a recovery of quite a serious problem, and I may never get that lean again, and I've reached a point where I'm actually really happy with my relationship with exercise and food. So it's like,
fuck yeah.
This is my body where I'm at my best. So like, and I realised I was going to keep that brief, and then that kind of escalated in time. So I don't know what you want to kind of pick out.
No,
of
I
that.
know I love that. It's wonderful. It's very difficult to give a brief anything when it comes to something personal. I get it. I love going on tangents, so I get it. And thank you for sharing all of that. I love understanding how people get to that place of, oh shit, I might have a problem, or, oh, maybe all the things that I was taught are actually incorrect. Because it's different for everyone. I mean, some people, when I say intuitive eating, they're like, oh my God, please, that's not real. That you're just going to get fat. That's just an excuse. Some people, when they discover it, they're like, oh my God, this has changed my life. I'm so much happier. As someone who's gone through specifically like eating disorder treatment and recovery, it is really tough. And it's so personal, and the way that you get to that kind of mountaintop of like, oh shit, here are all the things I've learned and here are all the things that are actually incorrect is very personal and different for everyone. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. I feel like I know the answer to this, but I always ask everyone on the podcast that comes on, what is your current relationship with your body?
It's definitely the best it has been. And it's funny that I said that to somebody recently, and they kind of like rolled their eyes or like kind of scoffed as if they were like,
really?
I don't believe you. Yeah,
I
don't believe you. I think you're making it up type thing. Because of how different I look, But I said, no, like, I used to wake up and weigh myself and take a progress picture, and I just point out all of the like perceived flaws of my body. And when you look at any pictures of me in the past, you'll just be like, what were you seeing? But that was because those behaviors fueled that mindset, right? Of like, nothing was ever good enough. Whereas now it's like, okay, I wake up and I'm like, I may not like some elements of my body, but there are some elements of my body that I actually really like and really love. And I remember that, I'm so much more than my body. I am a human being with a huge, diverse set of skills and characteristics. And my body isn't here for my aesthetic pleasure or somebody else's aesthetic pleasure. It's my vehicle to experience life. And so if my daughter comes up and hugs me, and then like she like slaps my belly because she likes the sound that it makes and finds it funny, and I'm like, I can just have this moment and just really enjoy it, and then we can go and get an ice cream on the beach because I'm not worried about it adding, you know, half a kilo on the scale.
That's wonderful. I love what you say about not being there for aesthetics, because I think we forget a lot of the time that our bodies are not here for people's perception. Like, we're not here to be a certain shape, a certain look. We're here to experience life. And you don't have to wake up every day and think that you are the most beautiful, amazing, hottest person ever to live a full life. Like, you can be happy and you can find joy even in the moments where you're like, I don't feel super great right now. But that's not, like, letting that hold you back is what leads into those disordered thoughts and that disordered eating. So I love that you said that.
Yeah.
I'd love to know, like, because as someone who also is kind of shares a lot online, I've been doing it for, I guess, a little over a year now. I really was more of like a comedian first, and then kind of stepped into like, okay, I'm going to start talking about my recovery. How has sharing your journey online come to fruition? Was there a day or a time where you were like, maybe I should start talking about this online? Maybe I should start spreading the word about this. How did that come to be?
I think because I was already a coach, it was just me documenting kind of what was going on. And it was difficult for me because I was so focused on helping people achieve like fat loss that I had to kind of pivot over time. And I went through a big wrestling of what my values were and what I was going to provide. And you know, coaching's like my livelihood, right? So I was like, I need to still make sure that I have clients who are paying me so that I can pay the bills. And you know, I won't lie that like business isn't as booming as it was back when I was Mr. Fat Loss.
Yep.
Because it is a very different. You're actually selling the thing that people want, but they don't realize it's what they need. If that makes sense, because everybody wants to feel at ease around food. They want physical confidence. They want to feel good in their bodies. They want to, you know, put on that you know, they want to put on that top. They want to take their top off at the beach. They want to go to the beach without feeling self-conscious. They want to be able to order the food that they want to enjoy rather than worrying about the calories or overeating that food because they perceive it as bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, those are all the things that I'm selling you, but that isn't found in a meal plan. It's not found in a set of macros or a, you know, a smaller figure. And so, to answer your point, because I was already talking about coaching, I just slowly started to pivot. So when I first learned about disordered eating, I talked a lot about that. I talked about disordered eating. I talked about fitness content and fitspiration and how a lot of that actually fosters that, right? And I talked a lot about relationship with food, but I used it as a way to sell fat loss at first. I was like, hey, if you improve your relationship with food, you'll probably stop overeating, you'll stop emotional eating, you'll feel better about yourself, and as a result, you know, these physical changes will occur. And for some people it does, right? But obviously for a lot of people it didn't. But a lot of people were like, hey, my relationship with food is loads better. I'm more consistent with exercise. I feel better. And actually I don't worry about the scale and stuff anymore. And I was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. And I realized that was what I was selling. So that slowly became more of the messaging that I was around.
Right.
And I just think that, as I said, you need to kind of, I share a lot about myself because it's a way to bond with people and help them realize kind of where the struggle really lies. And if you can help somebody improve their body image, which isn't how they look, but it's how they think about how they look, well, then you're going to help somebody with their eating behaviors and with their exercise behaviors and with their confidence. And that's, you know, eventually how the kind of messaging sort of came to be. But I always use my personal story as a vehicle to kind of bond with people and kind of share in that sort of struggle, I guess, rather than just outwardly saying, hey, do you struggle with this? I'm kind of like putting myself in that struggle.
Yeah. And you're really good at clapping back to people who are super rude, which is, it's funny because I don't know. Well, I do know why men tend to be the ones that comment on shit on the internet. They just, because no one has ever told them no. But like, you and I both get similar people in our comment sections. It's usually just dudes who don't believe in what we're selling, right? They think that like food freedom is bullshit. They think that body positivity is like promoting obesity, yada, yada, yada. Like, how have you built this confidence to be able to clap back at dudes who comment? They comment really horrible shit about your body. Like, they say the craziest shit. How have you been able to like not internalize that and just be able to throw it back at them?
I won't lie to you. When it first started happening, I did internalize a lot of it.
Yeah.
But that was earlier in my kind of journey of recovery. And so, you know, because the most recent reel that went mega viral and has had over 1 million views, I think it's had over 3 million views now, something stupid. Like, I still get comments on it to this day, and I posted it in like November or something stupid.
Wow, yeah.
Like, it's gone like mega mental. I first posted that actually last summer, right? So like,
oh my gosh, okay, yeah.
But it didn't go as viral then. It went a little bit viral, and I got loads of hate comments. And I remember, you know, turning off my phone, right? Turning off my Instagram notifications and kind of going into my shell a little bit. And I was like, wow, you know, that was really hard. And I kind of had to lick my wounds for a while.
Absolutely.
But I did, most recent kind of certification was a lot of work on body image, right? Like, I read a huge body image research book, and then I did a course that was created by a colleague of mine, actually, that was all about, like, you know, body image coaching. And I was basically doing the exercises as I was learning how to coach them. And it's a lot more detailed than the kind of body image section of, let's say, the intuitive eating book, which is, it's kind of small in comparison to all of their eating stuff. It's like, respect your genetics and don't be mean to your body, and then it's like, next chapter.
And
like,
love it.
We kind of have to do a bit more work than that. So I did a lot more work on it, and then I posted it again, and then this time when it started to, I think it's gone that well because of the amount of replies I've given. Because obviously every comment fuels the algorithm, right?
Right, yes.
So people say to me, like, why do you reply to them? And I'm like, one, I get loads of story views whenever I share the stories that people are doing. And then people have genuinely signed up with me because they've admired the confidence I've had with my replies. And how I've handled myself. So when people are like, why do you keep replying? I'm like, because it genuinely gets more views, more followers, right? Like, I've gone up to like 11.5k followers or something, and I think last summer I was at like 6,000.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome.
You know what I mean? Like, it's been a huge boost. And people have been like, wow, I wish I had the confidence to post like that or be like that, or at least, because a lot of people's biggest fear about weight gain is the judgment of other people.
Absolutely. Yep.
So if you can showcase how to do that, then they're going to be like, wow, I believe in this guy and what he's promoting. So to answer your question again succinctly, it would be just practice. And then I'm genuinely quite a dry, sarcastic bloke. So as soon as I stopped censoring myself and just saying the first thing that came into my head, it just made for some very hilarious replies. And some people, like yourself, love it. Whereas other people comment and go, oh, I'm reading your replies and you're a terrible person. And I'm like, are you taking the piss? Like, I'm just replying to something horrible somebody else has said.
It's really weird when people get mad about you defending yourself. Like, instead of getting mad at the people who are actually saying the horrible shit. It's like, why? Yeah, there was a reel that I posted recently, or not even recently. It was probably a few months ago. But you know how sometimes you post something and maybe it won't get picked up for a few weeks, but then randomly one person comments it and then it starts to get in like the explore page again. There was a video I posted that was talking about how, like, you know, people are always like, oh, I love my new diet. You know, it's 1,500 calories and I'm working out 7 times a day and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, no, that's actually an eating disorder, babe.
Yeah.
And a bunch of these women were commenting and were like, well, this is the only thing that works for me. And I've lost so much weight only eating 1,200 calories. And you can't tell people they have an eating disorder when, you know, you don't know, blah, blah, blah. And I get so mad because it makes me like so frustrated to comment back and be like, hey, like, I'm not telling you what to do with your body. I'm just pointing something out. And then a lot of them will say something like, well, you know what? You can't tell people what to do. You can't say, that someone has an eating disorder just off the bat. And I'm like, hey, babe, you're on my page. Like, you're in my comment section. My page is very clearly an eating disorder recovery account. So, like, you can't get mad at me for defending myself against people who are spewing diet advice in my comment section. Like, I'm not going to let people do that. If you want to talk about your diet, go to Skinny Talk. I don't need you here.
Yeah, Skinny Talk. Let's not embrace that shit show and give that more of a platform. But
yeah, have you seen all of the videos and stuff on there? I did a whole episode on it. I already have voiced my opinion.
Yeah, I know, and it's some people share it with me, and I'm just like, I can't even begin. I did like one reaction video, and it didn't go down great, but that's because I kind of used the sequence function rather than kind of taking the energy to film myself, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
I always find
yeah,
that,
yeah.
selfie reactions don't go as well as do you know what I mean? It's just so weird what the algorithm likes and what it doesn't like. But
yeah.
I'll definitely be doing more of that now that I'm back from holiday, because I need to. But when you said about, you know, they've come in and they've said all of that defensive stuff, it's because they're triggered, right? Like, you know, and when I get triggered by things online, you know, I've learned actually to think, okay, if that's triggered me, it's because there's something inside of me that's kind of getting my back up. And sometimes, you know, I'm triggered by the very obvious eating disorder, stupid shit. But when I'm triggered by something because it's a reflection of maybe something that I'm doing or not doing, I kind of have to sit and go, okay, this is about me, not them. And that's what they're not doing. They're getting triggered because they see that behavior in themselves, and they're like, I don't have an eating disorder. You know, it happened with a guy who, I was very friendly with a guy who owns a very big nutrition consultancy company that sold out for like a lot of money. And they were one of the first kind of American companies that did a lot of the kind of if it fits your macros, tracking. Okay. So they got big very quickly because they were kind of first to market. And we had a good relationship where we would talk quite regularly. I had him on my podcast a couple of times. And he'd kind of started to sort of unofficially sort of mentor me. But then as I started to change stance, you know, he was in my comment section a lot being like, oh, you know, having coffee for breakfast isn't necessarily disordered eating. And I'm like, well, it's kind of is.
Yeah.
You know,
what are we talking about?
You know, fasting a lot of the time and being obsessed with your weight, it kind of is the exact definition of. But he was triggered obviously because his whole business was built off of what I was tearing down.
Absolutely.
And that's why these men comment these things. They either hate themselves, they either lost within the diet mentality themselves, or they're trainers who are selling that opposite, or they're all three of those things. You know, I had one guy that just could not stop commenting to me and to other people, and I even checked out his page and I was like, you know, you're telling me it's about performance and fitness and all of these other things, and it's not necessarily about my aesthetics, but I was like, I run faster than you, I lift heavier than you, and you've got no idea of like my resting heart rate or my VO2 max or any of these other indicators. Like, you're literally just looking at a video of me.
Yes, it's always the fact that people don't want to know your actual health indicators. They just want to look at your body and say you're this, you're that, when it's like, where's your medical degree? Like, I don't see you with a stethoscope listening to my heart right now. I don't see you like taking my blood pressure. What do you mean you think I'm unhealthy? Yeah, that I could go on and on about how frustrating that is, especially as a woman. I feel like women who are really supposed to have a higher body fat percentage anyway, like we get told constantly that we're overweight, that we're unhealthy, that we're this, we're that. And it's like, you don't know that because you are not my doctor. Like, you're just a random person on the internet looking at my pooch because it protects my uterus, saying that I have a fat belly. Like, okay, it's so stupid.
It's crazy, isn't it? And it's a shame that, like, in medical institutions, the BMI is still used, right? Because obviously that fuels a lot of it. That's obviously where the terms obese and overweight came from in the first place. And, like, you know, I remember having private health insurance and I cancelled it because they were like, your premium's going up because you've gained weight. And I'm like, no, bye.
Oh,
like,
my God, really?
Yeah, because my BMI went up, right? And it's like, thankfully I'm in the UK, so I've got the NHS anyway.
Yeah.
But, you know, for those of you listening to this, if you don't know the history of the BMI and how it's kind of been lobbied by a lot of insurance providers in the first place, then, you know, there you go. But because I'm a fitness coach and I'm a health conscious person, I get screened quite regularly for my health, right? And I get my blood work taken regularly, and I'm not pre-diabetic. My cholesterol's fine. You know, my VO2 max is pretty good. I'm not as fit as I used to be, but that's because I used to train 8 times a week, right? Like I used to be I used to be a CrossFit athlete, right? Like I used to be incredibly fit. And I didn't realize, because in that mindset, I was constantly comparing myself to other people. Do you know what I mean? Like I was in that really bad headspace. Didn't really, enjoy, or not enjoy, but I guess give credit for how fit I'd gotten. Whereas now, like I can still run a 5K, I can still run a 10K, right? Like not as fast, but I can still do it without stopping. And there's not actually many people that can. Yeah, you know, like that's a big event that people train for. So it's like, yeah, my health's fine. Fuck off.
Well, also like fitness is so, to me, level of fitness is so subjective too, because it's like, what are you fit for? Because there's people who like will work out every day and they can like, you know, they can squat a lot of weight, they can bench a lot of weight, but it's like, what is that good for in your daily life? You know what I mean? Or like, if you can run a marathon, like that's killer, that's great, but like, when are you ever going to need to run 26.2 miles? You know what I mean?
No, you won't.
The same way that like my relationship with movement has changed a lot, because I used to go through a lot of phases where I would gaslight myself into thinking, oh, I love running, and I'd run for 6 months and then I'd get over it. Or I'd gaslight myself into doing like Orange Theory or weightlifting and try to make myself believe that I really enjoyed doing it, when I knew I was only doing it because I wanted to lose weight or look a certain way or whatever. And now most of my movement is just dance and dance classes and dancing for my dance company. And like that, to me, like dance is hard. Like it's a hard thing to do. But people might look at that and be like, oh, well, that's not really, like, you're not really exercising, you're not working out. But it's like, I know that if you tried to go to a dance class, you would fucking huff and puff the whole time, bro.
Yeah. It's just, but again, it's the gym is created by an aesthetic industry, right? And then and then that's exactly what they're selling. Because again, if it was movement, this is a huge thing I do with clients, because like that was a big part of my journey, was recovery from exercise. Was like, okay, I'm doing this because at first it was about getting lean, then it was about competing in CrossFit. But also competing in CrossFit, I was like, well, leaner is better, right? So it was this awful like myriad of punishment, basically. And as I was recovering my relationship with food and self, I was like, what am I even training for, right? Like, what am I doing right now? Like, do I enjoy this? And I've realised now, on the other side of that, I do genuinely enjoy weightlifting, but I don't enjoy like CrossFit circuits and things.
Yeah, like the competitiveness of it.
Yeah, and the circuits where you do it and you end up flat on your back and tasting blood afterwards, right? And actually, I play more cricket, which is a boring sport to many, but I also got back into my amateur musical theatre, right? Because I wasn't training all day and then needing to work at night. So I was like, I can work during the day and go and do musical rehearsals in the evening. And that's a big thing I do with clients, is finding them hobbies like dance or whatever, because as adults we just get stuck into, you know, all work no play, and we think the gym is play, but it isn't. Like,
oh no,
it's not the same as a hobby or a team sport.
Right. I did want to ask you about that before we kind of got into some questions. So you have a master's in musical theater, which is so cool. I love that. And obviously a lot of performers, like we all have our own weird relationships with the stage and how we're perceived, and depending on if you get typecast and, you know, costume fittings and dealing with all of the bullshit that comes with being a performer. How has that informed your relationship with everything that you've gone through the last few years? Like, now that you're kind of back into it again, do you feel like musical theater is a little bit easier, or tell me a little bit about that?
It's definitely easier because I care less about that image, right? And then I go for roles much more focused on like whether I believe that I can sing or act the part, rather than like what I look like. And in amateur musical theatre, there's a bit more flexibility for that as well, right? Because it's restricted to the people who are auditioning for the show. And you've got so many groups inside you know, less so in smaller towns, but in a city like Leeds, for example, where I am, there's loads of amateur groups. So actually, in terms of the semi-decent men that are in amateur musical theatre, we're in quite short supply. So I kind of back myself a lot of the time to get role that I'd want or like, which obviously then makes the time worthwhile.
Yeah.
So for example, like I just did the only amateur production of Les Miserables that's ever been done, because they're doing a huge UK wide to celebrate 40 years of Les Mis. Like different societies in the UK have been granted the rights to do it amateurly for the first time.
That's awesome.
So that was really cool. And but at first it definitely affected things, because I remember being at my drama school doing my masters, and that was when I was in the sort of start of my kind of CrossFit mental career phase. So I was going to CrossFit either like before college or after college, depending on what my college hours were, and college was like 9 till 5 every day.
Oh wow.
And it was only for a year, right? So actually, if I had my time back, I would work harder at college, right? I'd do extra dance, I'd do extra singing, I'd do extra acting, because instead I was like, I got to go get to CrossFit and then, you know, cook all my food for the next day type thing.
Oh my God, sorry. My cat just jumped up and scared the shit out of me.
No worries.
Oh, Leo. Okay, you can sit here, right? You can sit right here. Okay, keep going.
So, and I remember people in my masters were like, oh, you know, you probably need to get a bit slimmer because musical theatre boys who are in the chorus kind of all look a certain way, and you want to make sure that you're able to sort of fit in and that you're castable, particularly because you'll be young when you leave, and that's what, you know, casting directors will be looking at you as for the chorus rather than as a part, because you're young, you're inexperienced, and it'll be your first job. And even then the acting coach who was doing our vocal stuff, I mean, I had issues with my speaking voice and everything when I was younger, and that actually just turned out that I was speaking too low, right, to get like vocal fold vibration, and it was actually my singing teacher that helped me realise that, but he thought that my voice was croaky and unsupported because I was too muscular.
Okay. Oh,
he
wow.
was like, you're
That's
too
so
muscular,
weird.
you know, your vocal tract is too tense, and it's because of the size of your traps and things like that. So he was telling me to do less weightlifting, and I was like, well, I'm not tense because we do yoga and dance, and I'm actually the most flexible boy in the class. And like other girls in the class were like, that's true, he is. Do you know what I mean? And we were kind of like, what's the source of my kind of croaky speaking voice? It was very strange. So yeah, there was a lot of image focus there. But if anything, I wish I could go back and slap myself about a bit and say, work harder here, because I mean, CrossFit obviously became my career for a while, and then I became a personal trainer, and all roads lead to here. But that sort of body obsession actually, it took away from the focus of drama school, which is why I was there in the first place.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting how so many performers have that kind of villain origin story of like a teacher or an instructor or someone like telling them something about their body or the way that they look that just sticks with them for so long. And then you realize like, oh no, it was actually just something completely different. I remember I used to have dance teachers kind of talk to my mom about my weight, but I was like one of the better dancers when I was a kid, like in my little hip hop troupe. And it was always weird to me that I got comments like that, because it just felt like, well, I'm keeping up with everyone else. I don't really understand why it matters that my costume is extra large or whatever the fuck. Like it's such a weird industry, the performance industry.
Yeah.
I did send you a very short article before our podcast today that I thought was interesting. I have like Google alerts turned on for certain phrases, and one of them is just eating disorders. Okay. And I saw there was one Google alert that I got where there were a bunch of articles that were referencing this same study. But basically from newsmedical.net, this one article in specific is talking about that a study has found that over 1 in 5 boys and men in Canada and the United States may meet the diagnostic criteria for an eating disorder. And then it goes into talking about how there needs to be a little bit more awareness and prevention and intervention for young men and boys, because there's just not any. What do you think would be a good way to reach that audience? You know, what would be a good way to reach young men these days to say like, hey, this might be disordered eating?
Hey, I mean, I wish I knew. Like, if you find a better way than what I'm doing, then come tell me. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've tried to kind of position my content that way. I've tried to position my podcast that way. I didn't go so far as niching towards men only in terms of coaching, because then I really would struggle business wise, right? Because like,
oh yeah,
you know, they just aren't as forthcoming. But actually also a lot of men who do reach out to me in the DMs, because there are a lot, right? Like if you're listening to this and you're a guy, like I had a bunch of people interviewed on my podcast who were anonymous, right? Anonymous guys who wanted to talk about this kind of thing. I get a lot of DMs from guys saying, hey, thanks so much for talking about this. You know, I struggle with it too, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm doing a lot of talks in sort of secondary schools and younger as well for boys in this area, particularly because thanks to things like Skinny Talk and the algorithm that TikTok has, a lot of teenage boys are just now like focused on hitting the gym, right? Like I was chatting to a guy at Les Mis and he was talking about his son's just at the gym every evening after school. And I'm like, you know, bloody hell, when I was 16 I was getting pissed in a field with my mates. Like I wasn't hitting the gym.
No,
right?
no.
But to answer your question of what can we do, I think it's just about more and more men coming forward about it, right? Like more and more guys, when they've done a superhero role or similar, they're now talking in interviews about how difficult that was, right? And how tough that was and how unsustainable that physique is, and more men need to do that. And more and more men need to have those open conversations so that men can be aware of when they're seeking to struggle with it. But I think as well, you're also fighting a huge tide against the kind of manosphere where it's like, you know, fuck that, you know, being a man is all about being primal, being muscular, being, you know, a fighter, a protector, and you just need to do a David Goggins and run yourself into oblivion. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I wonder if sometimes there's like a sneaky way to do it, because I think a lot about like my following, and my following is like 89% men. And I think it's because I was a stand-up comedian, and that was my main like kind of intro to the internet, and then recently just kind of switched into recovery. And it's funny because I feel like because there are so many men that followed me for my comedy, now they're listening to all this stuff about recovery. They're like, oh, this kind of has to do with me. And like, there have been men that are like, I started following you because of comedy, but now I stay because you talk about these issues. And I feel like more men need to hear that. And so sometimes I wonder, like, are there more sneaky ways that we can enter into these places where men are already paying attention and sneak in more messaging about like self-love and body acceptance and weight stigma? It's so difficult though.
Well, I mean, it is one of the reasons why I originally reached out to you and said, hey, you know, like I see that you record in person, but would you ever be interested in remote? Because I think you talked a lot about how a lot of men followed you, and I was like, oh, okay, like, you know, Morgan's talking a lot about this kind of stuff now. She's not had a guy talk about this on the podcast. You know, maybe we should open up the conversation to talk about men a bit more in this realm, and thereby if we can help people with this episode, then that's a great thing, right? Like and talk about it more. Because I think and I want to reach out to a couple more people who speak specifically to men, but it's like, you know, I'm in a coaching group with other guys, which is more about sort of like self-development and like business and stuff. But like, you know, one of the guys was like, Jonny, I actually don't understand what it is that you do.
Oh my God.
They're like, I don't get it. And they're like, I love, you know, eating steak for breakfast and going boxing. And they're like, I don't understand what you do. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, maybe I need to change my messaging a little bit. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm like, you've kind of got to constantly think about, you want to be authentic and true to yourself, but you also want to push your messaging across so that people feel seen and then go, this guy can help me with this, and this is actually an issue, rather than being like, I don't understand what you do. And maybe they're just too far gone. Right.
I was going to say, sometimes I wonder if it's like a willful ignorance thing, because it's pretty obvious, at least looking at your profile, like, okay, male body image aligned eating expert. Like, that to me sounds like someone that's going to help you with your body image and learning how to eat. But when you're super steeped in diet culture, sometimes seeing that stuff is like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would I do that when I've already figured out the formula? I already know what I need to do. It's restrict calories and overexercise or whatever. Yeah. I do have some questions from my following. So I posted the other day saying that you were going to be on the pod, and I wanted to ask my followers if they had any questions for you. So I have like 8 or so here. Some of them are definitely have a little more shorter of like an answer, I'm assuming, but if you're willing to answer these,
Let's
would
go.
you like to go through them?
Yeah,
okay,
let's
great.
go. We'll do. Maybe I'll be quicker with my answers as well.
Yeah, I know it's so tough because there's so much to say. There really is so much to say. Okay, so this first one says, how do we as men support each other when it comes to the toxic perfect body culture?
Well, by talking with each other openly about it first, right? By saying, hey, have you ever noticed that being a guy can be quite tough and that we're showing this body that's supposed to be the ideal physique, opening up, this is my experience with it. I've actually found that makes me feel less than, or I've struggled to do that in the past. And if you're open with that, then somebody else, they may do, or they may just listen. You've kind of got to do it with somebody who you feel is probably open to that kind of conversation. Because as I just said with you, somebody might be like, what are you talking about, bro? Like,
Yeah, what is this?
Just go for a morning jog and don't eat carbs.
Yeah.
Whereas it's much more deep than that. And so you can support each other by talking about that more. Because the more that you talk about it and open up about it, then the more that they'll feel open to. And as I said, if you look at people like Channing Tatum and Zac Efron, and people like that who have talked about how tough they found getting in shape, in air quotes, for their role, then you can see that there are more blokes who are like, yeah, okay, this standard is like a little bit ridiculous.
Yes, perfect. I love that. This next one is kind of interesting. So this guy says, 43-year-old father of 2 boys. I work out regularly and I eat well, but I need abs. What am I doing wrong?
Well, my question would be, why do you need abs?
Yep, that's exactly
Right.
what I was going to say.
Because abs, one, they're not actually like attainable for everyone, and they're not sustainable for everyone, right? And abs are a muscle group in themselves, right? So they require training, but also everybody's genetics are different. So your abs will look different, they'll respond different to training stimulus, and your body fat level that you sit best at will be different from someone else, right? So
Yep.
I know people that walk around who have low body fat levels, but they're not necessarily doing much different than I am. They just have a different place where their body feels good. So you've got to ask yourself, who am I doing this for? Like, am I doing this because I want to look good for myself or for other people? Or have I just never had them and I want to do it as a kind of challenge to myself? And then you've got to ask, well, what's important, right? Like, if I like being around for my boys and having, a relationship with food where I can enjoy food with them, and I exercise a lot, but it doesn't take away from my family time and it doesn't take away from me at work or who I want to be, then you might be in your best place. And actually, by pursuing abs, you might take time away from your sons, time away from your work, time away from your spouse. And so although you might achieve a physical output, you might find on a kind of emotional and relationship level with other people, those things would decline. And you've got to ask yourself, is that worth it?
And also maybe looking back at, like, instead of using the word or the phrase, what am I doing wrong? Thinking about all the things that you're doing right. Because it sounds like, I mean, if you're 43 and you have 2 boys and you're moving regularly and you're eating well, that sounds like a full life to me. I mean, the abs probably aren't going to add anything but stress.
Exactly.
This next question was actually from a female follower asking about her partner. She says, how can I support my partner to reach his fitness goals while also helping him love himself?
Great question, because sometimes people don't think that those are synonymous with each other, but in fact they are, right? Morgan, you talked about how like you would gaslight yourself into doing Orange Theory or running or whatever, and you were like, I actually don't enjoy any of these things, and now you're like really into dance, and you're like, dance is hard, I really enjoy it, and it's great, great movement. That is because you have begun to accept yourself and realise that your body is deserving of respect and care. And that's what exercise is, right? If we see fitness as a means to an end, we're never going to enjoy it and we're never going to stick with it. Look at the amount of people who decide to run a marathon and then never run ever again, right? That's not
Oh God.
You don't need a fitness goal or whatever. You need to think about the person you want to be and then tie fitness into that, right? So it's either hobbies or it's movement of some sort. We just talked about that guy with 2 kids, right? Like, go biking with your kids, go swimming with your kids.
Yeah.
You know, take your kids camping, take your kids hiking, take your kids playing sport. Do all of those things. And with having a positive body image isn't about endless body positivity and fake love. It's in fact going, okay, my feelings for my body are going to go up and down, but my body always deserves care, always deserves love, and always deserves respect. And a fitness or movement regime of some form is that respect. So what do I enjoy, and what am I going to stick with consistently?
Yes. And also thinking about, like, are those fitness goals something just because you want to reach an arbitrary number and you're going to be happy when you meet that number? Or is the fitness goals about fitting into a certain jean size? I always wonder what people mean when they say fitness goals, because I think the goals can sometimes be a little like silly or feel, unless you're like training for a specific thing, you know, or you have something that you're doing because of the exercise. Sometimes I'm like, does it really matter how fast you run a mile? I mean, is someone timing you when you're running to the post office? I don't know.
No, that a lot of that is, again, this is why men are inherently quite lonely, is because they're inherently competitive, and so then they find it difficult to talk to each other on a deeper level, and they find it difficult to relate and connect with each other because they're always secretly competing with each other. So when people are like, "Oh, I want abs and I want to run a 5-minute mile," it's like, why?
Yeah.
So that your buddies can be like, "Hey man, you look great and you're really super fit," and it's like, "Yeah, but you know, now I don't spend any time with my kids and I'm always eating chicken." It's like, oh, it sounds shit.
Yeah. Oh God. Just boneless baked chicken with no seasoning. Okay. How do we overcome that being jacked is the only acceptable body type for men to be attractive?
You start questioning who said that in the first place. So like we both said about aesthetics at the start of the podcast, right? And it's like, if you look back at beautiful women through history, you have different shapes and sizes of women, right? And you have different bodily shapes and sizes that were deemed the kind of social ideal. And you weren't born caring about how you looked, right? You picked that up over time.
Yes, we were taught that.
You picked that up through social conditioning. And so you have to start questioning, who said this in the first place? And do I even believe it? Right? Do I even believe it? Look at loads of pictures of guys. Like, do you think that looks good, and why? And you know, you can only get over that if you start questioning where it came from in the first place. And until you do that, because like people who were fat in the olden days were actually the healthiest people, because they were the people who had money to afford food.
Yeah, they were like the rich, noble people. Yeah. I will also say, like, as a woman that has like been with men, like I think that I'm assuming that this is a straight man that is like asking, like, if he's looking to attract a woman. I feel like women are actually a little bit more open to different body types. There are a lot of judgmental people out there. Any gender, any identity, there are going to be judgmental ass people and they suck. But like, I think a lot of the time I would much rather date a man that I find attractive because of his intelligence and his emotional intelligence and his ability to be open-minded rather than the size of his biceps. Like it's not going to make a huge difference. And I think women look a lot more for that emotional connection and the mental connection rather than someone that is jacked or whatever, because there are plenty of men that are, look at movie stars. I mean, Timothée Chalamet certainly is not a jacked dude, but he's dating Kylie Jenner. You know what I mean? There's hope for all of us.
And beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
You just have different preferences. So as you said, like if you're doing it because you want that physical attraction, as you said, right, from the opposite sex or the same sex, because you know, I've worked with gay men and chatted a lot with gay men about how there's a really big kind of push in that community as well about that kind of physique.
Yes, absolutely.
But again, I think a lot of the time it's all just social conditioning and a social front, and when you dig deeper, it's actually very different.
It's a very interesting world we live in today. Okay, next one. This guy says, what are some of the common obstacles that you encounter when you try to help men?
I guess the first is the kind of understanding of what the cause of the issues are, right? Because as men, we can be very much like, this is a nail and I need a hammer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I just need the tool to fix the issue. And in our head it's like, I'm fat, therefore I need a diet, right? Like I'm not jacked, therefore I need a gym membership. And if you found yourself going through the same cycles of like rigid eating and over exercising followed by absolute chaos and absolute gluttony and absolute, lethargy of doing nothing, well then the answer is not another hammer. It's going deeper than that, and it's like, what's the root cause of all of these issues, which is usually like self-shame, self-judgment, perpetuation of societal ideals, and a kind of confusion over what really is going to be the cause of kind of self-happiness and self-confidence. And so that's the same with everyone, but I think with men it's not so much a problem working with them, because I think once they're bought in, they're in. But sometimes they're a little bit in, and it's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I still feel uncomfortable like this, so I need to do this. And you're like, no, but especially if you're men who are struggling with like binge eating, let's say, the more you try and restrict and diet, the more you're going to binge eat. Yep. And a lot of the time it's like, yeah, but I don't want to get fat, I don't want to gain weight. And it's like, you're only going to stay stuck in this pattern though if you don't get over that fear of weight gain. And so that's the biggest thing for sure. Yeah,
that's literally my entire recovery. It's just those last 5 sentences. That's all it is. How does body image affect how men interact with the world? It's a big one.
Good point. Yeah, it is. Yeah, because I think your body image is the source of like your kind of self-respect and self-confidence, for want of a better word. And I think sometimes you can have a faux sense of confidence if you look a certain way and certain people give you compliments about that, and that only lasts for as long as people have only seen you for a new time, right? So like people would be to me like, oh my god, you've lost weight. I'm like, yeah, I have. And then they'd never say it again because they've said it, right? And like, oh wow, how'd you do that? Oh, I did this. Oh, cool. And then, how are you? Right? And like for me it was like, I'm weighing myself daily, I'm looking in the mirror, I'm taking photos. It's like, fucking hell, like I've still got love handles I need to deal with, like I'm gonna do XYZ. And actually the confidence was fake, because it was like, it was only there if people were complimenting me, whereas underneath the surface it was like, man, I need to lose more weight, right? Like I need to do this, or is there going to be, how many calories is in that piece of chicken type thing. So it's massive, because when you flip the script and you start thinking about, okay, well, aesthetically my body can do sort of whatever, and as I go through life it'll change, and that's fine because that's what bodies do. And instead, who I am is much more important. Who I am as a person, what characteristics I have, what skills I have, how I relate to other people, where I spend my time, what my boundaries are, then that massively impacts the rest of your relationships, right? Like if you have time to actually connect with other people and see them and have meals with them and take them out to places and go places and do fun things, because you're not at the gym or you're not weighing your broccoli, then you're going to have deeper and more meaningful relationships. And if you have that confidence of like, I'm going to wear clothes that fit me, that I feel I look good in, and it's not like, oh man, I wish this large t-shirt would just fit me for a change, right? Like I used to wear shirts that were too tight because I feel like they should have fit.
Oh yes.
And then be self-conscious about wearing a tight t-shirt or whatever.
Yeah. Whereas now, or because you think you have to be a certain size.
Yeah. Like I've got to be this size. That was a big thing for me. Was you talked about like, oh, why does it matter if my outfit's like an XL? Like that was a big thing for me with trousers, like getting trousers that fit. And if I was always like a large or XL or like a big waist size, it would be like really big for me. Whereas, when you take away all of that stuff, you actually can wear the clothes that you like and that you feel you look good in and that suit your personal style. And then, you can express yourself through your personal style rather than trying to fit yourself into a box, which is pretty cool.
I'll also say, as a woman, I feel like every time I have been around men that have bad body image, I find that they tend to be critical of my body as well. Oh, yeah. I've been in situations where even if it's a guy friend or a romantic partner, like if they don't like the way they look, then they tend to also be critical or at least just make comments about my body as well, which to me feels very like unfair. So I think that's another kind of motivation to get yourself right, is because you don't want to be the person that's in a friend group that's making other people feel bad because you don't feel good about yourself.
Oh, yeah, like, I was much more critical of everybody else when I was in such a shit place.
And it's very easy to do that because that's kind of how we're taught to interact with the world in general. This next question just says, general thoughts on brotivation and the likes, which I haven't heard brotivation before, but I wonder if that's like a manosphere thing.
I've never heard that phrase, and I'm guessing that's like the, hey dude, you just need to man up and eat less and you know, start that running plan, or you know, you just need to wake up earlier and hit the gym, like you need to make the time. I feel like that's that kind of mentality.
Rise and grind,
and I think you only need to go to the comment section of people like David Goggins' YouTube, or who was the guy, Jocko Willink, right, the extreme ownership bloke. You only need to go to the comment section of their YouTube videos to see very, very struggling people. And it's like, these are people who are like, how can I get myself to just do this? Or, hey, I'm really struggling with anxiety, or I'm really struggling with low confidence. Hey, I'm really struggling with depression. And, you know, their answer is like, well, just, you know, do some Wim Hof breathing and fucking man up, right? Like, just get over it, bitch. And it's like, that's clearly not helping anyone.
Right. Yeah.
It's just bullshit, right? This idea of motivation and discipline is all a bit bullshit. It's all a bit socially constructed. Whereas motivation is much more long-lasting and powerful when it comes from internally driven sources, right? Which is where the self-determination theory comes in from. And it's like, who are you as a person? What's important to you? And what actions are going to help you lead a fulfilling life? And brotivation is all like, yeah, but you should just get up earlier and eat fish. And it's like, not actually important to me. And doesn't actually help you feel better.
Yeah, it's the same thing as like women who, I hate going to like fitness classes with women, like Pilates specifically, because it'll always be like, all right, ladies, think about those bikini bodies. Like, let's think about all the things we're burning off. A huge reason why I stopped going to Orange Theory was because I don't know if it was just the studio I was at or if it was a general culture, but they very often would talk about the exercises we were doing in terms of what you could eat later. Like, we're doing this so we can eat a donut after class. We're doing this so we can have cake on our birthday. And I'm like, what? This is not my motivation. Okay, last question, and this one's probably my favorite one because I love this. Can we feel comfortable in our own bodies without dedicating our lives to diet and exercise?
Yes. As a single answer, yeah. And hopefully this podcast has helped shed light on why that would be, right? Because again, I talk about this a lot. A positive body image is different to body positivity. Body positivity is great, has its space definitely, but is also rooted a lot more in ethnic origins, right? As you'll know with a lot of your recovery journey and research. Whereas having a positive body image is actually about having a positive association with the self and with yourself, and understanding what your body is here for, right? So it's a combination of reducing negative behaviors like body checking and body bashing, and encouraging more self-care behaviors like rest, nourishment, and movement. But a lot of the time that isn't diet and exercise, that's eating enough, resting enough, and moving in ways that you enjoy. And then combining that kind of element of body functionality of like, hey man, you're listening to this podcast, right? You might be watching Morgan and I talking on YouTube. You're using two of the senses that you're now very much taking for granted, right? Like touch, taste, the sensations of the human body are actually quite mind-blowing when you think about it. And that's what your body is here for, right? It's here to experience the life. And when you understand and appreciate that, and you're like, man, fuck, actually all of those diets and exercises were making me feel worse about myself, compare myself to other people, and they were actually really, really disrespectful to my body, and I actually did a lot of damage. And if you lead with satisfaction, you'll find that everything clicks into place. And it's a definite turning point with clients of mine, where they're like, leading with satisfaction is kind of like my key word in my work with clients. It's like, If movement isn't satisfying, why are you doing it? If food isn't satisfying, why are you eating it? If overeating isn't satisfying, then that's also a cue that something needs to change. And as soon as you lead with satisfaction, you're like, you overcome that idea of intuitive eating being just eating donuts and cake and getting all fat and sassy, to quote that famous video, but which, you know, promotes fat phobia anyway by saying that overeating is the only cause of weight gain, right? Like, you know, you notice all these things. But my point being is that satisfaction is actually about having that great balance that you so crave, and it isn't found in diet and exercise.
Right. And I'll also say that as a year and some change into recovery, I completely feel comfortable in my body. It may not be to the point where I feel, you know, the most like beautiful in my life or whatever, but I think I feel probably the most comfortable in my body now at 29 than I have since I was a kid. So it's definitely worth pursuing, and it's worth giving up diet culture to feel comfortable in your body.
100%.
I think.
And I feel the same way, right? And if, like, check out some of my posts, if you've not seen them, you know, you'll see pictures and videos of Shredded Jonny, but Shredded Jonny was doing that for everybody else. It was that constant need for, like, acceptance, whereas I'd never accepted myself, and that was actually what I needed to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story and being here today. I'm so excited for this episode to come out. Do you have an affirmation that you would like to share? Unfortunately, I can't have you sign the board because you're literally in the UK, but I'd love to know what your favorite affirmation is.
You'll have to sign it for me. Do you know what? I do definitely, this is going to sound a bit cheesy, and this will be like the guy in me as well, I bet, but like, I do feel good when I look in the mirror and like I've just moisturized and I go like, you are sexy and you are damn good looking.
Nice. I like it.
And that just sets me up, because I'm like, hell yeah, let's go.
That's a good one. I like it. You're sexy and you're damn good looking. I'm going to start saying that to myself.
You'll feel great instantly, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, especially after the moisturize. At least you moisturize. Hey, a lot of guys don't do that.
But that's the thing, right? Like, people think that having a positive body image is giving up, but instead it's actually letting yourself live and then thinking about, how am I going to express my personal style, right? So for me, it was like, how do I want to, you know, have my facial hair? How do I want to have my hair? You know, I want to moisturize my skin and like use scrub and feel good. And I mean, I don't like go overly far with it, but whatever people's regimes are is cool. Like, you just got to do what helps you feel good, and that's very different to like the cosmetic industry, for example. And you only need to look at that to realize that people get lost in really big cycles of self-improvement, right? Like, first it might be a bit of a nip and tuck, then it's you know, then it's lip filler, and then it's, you know, then it's something else, and then it's this, and then it's that, and it's like they're constantly looking for an external source.
Absolutely.
It's not there.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot, dude. It's such an incredible journey, but I'm glad that you are here to talk about it, and I really appreciate like you sharing your own personal journey. Where can everyone find you? Where are you on the interwebs?
The best place is Instagram, right? It's the place where I'm most prolific, right? I don't really use Facebook for much outside of personal usage, and TikTok, I'm there, but I don't really post, and I try to
love that for you. Stay off of it, honestly.
Yeah,
at this point.
I was just like, no. So yeah, Instagram's the best place. I do have a podcast myself, actually, called Beyond the Mirror.
Yeah.
And that is, again, about life beyond the mirror, right? It's about life.
That's awesome.
Beyond aesthetics. So I've had solo episodes, I've had guest episodes. I've not posted on it a lot recently because I've been quite busy, but then that's just my idea of self-care, right? Of being like, hey, I've got too much on right now for that. So yeah, I'll pick it back up in a while.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys for listening. Jonny's handles and his website and everything will be in the show notes so that you can have easy access. He posts all kinds of really fun stuff. I really enjoy watching your videos and seeing all of your carousels and all the shit that you say to crazy incels in your comment section. It's so funny. But thank you for being here again. And thank you guys for listening to My Body, My Jokes. We'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to My Body, My Jokes. Please be advised that the information provided in this podcast is for general discussion purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always, always, always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare professional with any concerns you might have regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Also, if you or someone you know is struggling with an eating disorder, please call the National Eating Disorders Association helpline at 1-800-931-2237. Bye.